Hello, my dear students. Welcome to a new episode of biology. Today we will talk about carbon-based molecules. First, let's see the key concept for today. Carbon-based molecules are the foundation of life. The main ideas, number one, carbon atoms have unique bonding properties. This is very important. And number two, four main types of carbon-based molecules are found in the living things. This is like an introduction that says the car manufacturers often build several types of cars from the same internal frame. Yes, the size and the styles of the cars might differ on the outside only, but they have the same structure underneath. This is what happens in the carbon-based molecules. They are the same, they are similar, but they are much more varied. There are millions of carbon-based molecules, but they form around only a few simple frames composed of carbon atoms. So what's special about carbon? Carbon is often called the building block of life because the carbon atoms are the basis of most molecules that make up the living things. Carbon-based molecules form the structure of living things and carry most of the processes that keep the organisms alive. Carbon atoms, they have unique bonding properties. Why? Carbon is so important because of its atomic structure. It gives the carbon atoms bonding properties that are unique among elements because each carbon atom has 4 unpaired electrons on its outermost energy level. As you know that carbon atom C6, so the nucleus contains 6 protons. The first energy level takes only 2 electrons. Then there are 4 more electrons in the outermost energy level. So this means that the carbon atom needs 4 negative electrons in order to become stable. So the carbon atom can bind to 4 different atoms, including the other carbon atoms. This is very important. Okay. Therefore, carbon atoms can form covalent bonds with up to 4 different atoms, including other carbon atoms. This is very interesting. The carbon-based molecules, they are found in 3 fundamental structures. The straight chains, as you can see, the branched chains, the one with branches, and in a ring shape, as you can see here. So all the carbon-based molecules, they have one of these 3 fundamental structures, straight chains or branched chains or rings. All 3 types of molecules are the result of carbon's ability to form 4 covalent bonds. Carbon chains can bond with carbon rings. Yes, the chains can bond with carbon rings to form a very large and very complex molecules. These large molecules can be made of many small molecules that are bonded together. In a sense, the way these molecules they form is similar to the way in which the individual links of metals come together to make the bicycle chain. You know the bicycle chain in the pedal? This chain, this metal chain, it's formed from small individual links. So this is the same. The carbon-based molecules, the carbon atoms attach to each other like this one. Okay, in many carbon-based molecules, the small molecules are subunits of the entire molecule. They are links in a chain, as we said. These subunits, they are called a monomer. So when monomers link together, they make a polymer. Again, each subunit in the complete molecule, this is called a monomer. When monomers are linked together, like the one that you see in the picture here, so they form a molecule called polymer. Okay. So what is a polymer? A polymer is a large molecule or macromolecule. The word macro means big or large. They are made of many monomers that are bonded together. Okay, all of the monomers in a polymer, they might be the same, such as in starch, or they may be different, such as they are in proteins. So the monomers are the small subunits that are linked together to make the polymer. Sometimes these monomers are the same, like the polymer starch, or they might be different, like the polymer proteins. All organisms are made of 4 types of carbon-based molecules. This is very important. These 4 carbon-based molecules are carbohydrates, lipids, proteins, and nucleic acids. These molecules have different structures and functions, but all are formed around carbon chains and rings, as we already agreed. So first, let's talk about carbon or carbohydrates. This is the first carbon-based molecules found in organisms. Fruits and grains, they are in different food groups, but they both contain large amounts of carbohydrates. So what are carbohydrates? They are molecules composed of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen, and sometimes it includes sugar and starches. Carbohydrates are molecules composed of carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, and they include sugars and starches. Carbohydrates can be broken down to provide a source of usable chemical energy for your cells. Yes, this is in the process of cellular respiration, for example. Carbohydrates are also a major part of plant cell structure. This is what we will find out at the end of carbohydrates part. Okay, the most basic carbohydrates are simple sugars, or they are called monosaccharides. The word mono means one. Many simple sugars have either 5 or 6 carbon atoms. We already know 2 of these. Fruits contain a 6 carbon sugar, which is called fructose. So fructose is the sugar of fruits. This is a 6 carbon sugar. Also, another 6 carbon sugar is the glucose. Glucose is one of the sugars made by plant cells during the process of photosynthesis. This is the glucose that can be ring-shaped, which is often shown as simplified hexagon. Simple sugars can be bonded to make larger carbohydrates. For example, 2 sugars are bonded together to make the disaccharide you know as the table sugar. Di means 2. 2 sugars bonded together to make the disaccharide you know as the table sugar. Many glucose molecules can be linked to make polysaccharides. Polysaccharides, means many, which are polymers of monosaccharide, which is glucose. The household sugar, which is sucrose, is a disaccharide. So it is made of 2 molecules of carbohydrates or sugars, or a 2 sugar molecule, which is glucose and fructose. Together, they make up the sucrose, the household sugar. Starches, glycogen, and cellulose, they are polysaccharides. So these are polysaccharides made of many monosaccharides. Starches and the glycogen, they are similar, but they differ from cellulose because their glucose monomers are bonded together in a different way, and we will study how they are different. Most starches are branched chains of glucose molecules. So they are branched chains of glucose molecules. For example, starches are made and stored by plants. This is very important. And they can be broken down as a source of energy for plants and animals. What about glycogen? Glycogen is the same, but it is made and stored only in animals. It's more highly branched than the plant starches. So the starches are made and stored by the plants, while glycogen is made and stored by animals. What about cellulose? Cellulose is somewhat different from starches and the glycogen because it has a straight, rigid structure that makes cellulose molecules a major building block in a plant cell structure. Actually, it makes the cell walls of the plant. Cellulose makes up the cell wall that is the tough outer covering of plant cells. You have eaten cellulose before in a stringy fibers of vegetables, such as celery, for example, so you know that it's tough to chew and hard to break up, right? Here are this is the structure of the starch. It's a branched chain, as you can see, but the cellulose, this is one straight chain. Starch is a polymer of glucose monomers that often has a branched structure, but cellulose, it's a polymer made of glucose monomers as well that has a straight, rigid structure. Then the second carbon-based molecules found in organisms, this is lipids. Lipids, they are non-polar molecules. Do you remember the word the non-polar? Means that the electrons are distributed equally between the bonded atoms that include fats, oils, and cholesterol. Lipids are non-polar molecules that include fats, oils, and cholesterol, like carbohydrates. Most lipids contain chains of carbon atoms that are bonded to oxygen and hydrogen atoms. Like carbohydrates, most lipids contain chains of carbon atoms that are bonded to oxygen and hydrogen atoms. Some lipids are broken down as a source of usable energy as well. Other lipids, they are parts of the cell structure, and we will know which part of the cell structure. Fats and oils. These are two familiar types of lipids. We all know them. The fats and oils, they store large amounts of chemical energy in the organisms. The animal fats, they are found in foods such as meat and butter. You know the plant fats as oils, such as the olive oil and peanut oil. The structure of fats and oils are similar. They both consist of a molecule called the glycerol. This is very important, bonded to molecules called fatty acids. So what is a fatty acid? It's a chains, fatty acids are chains of carbon atoms bonded to hydrogen atoms. Fatty acids are chains of carbon atoms bonded to hydrogen atom. Then we have two types of fatty acids or fatty acid chains. They can be saturated or unsaturated. What does this mean? Look at this figure right here. The saturated fatty acid, can you see all the carbon-carbon bonds? They are single bonds. And every place that can have or bear or bond to a hydrogen atom, it already have a hydrogen atom. This is the meaning of saturated fatty acid. What about unsaturated fatty acids? Look here. We have carbon-carbon double bond, carbon-carbon double bond. So some places have carbon-carbon double bond, so this is not fully saturated with hydrogen atoms. This is the meaning of unsaturated fatty acids. Saturated fats contain fatty acids in which all carbon-carbon bonds are single bonds, but the unsaturated fats have fatty acids with at least one carbon-carbon double bond. Many lipids, both the fats and oils, contain three fatty acids bonded to glycerol. This is why three, this is tri, so they are called the triglycerides. Triglycerides. Most animal fats are saturated fats. The animal fats are saturated fats. All the bonds are single. They are bonded to many hydrogen atoms, which means that they have the maximum number of hydrogen atoms possible. That is, every place that a hydrogen atom can bond to a carbon atom is filled with a carbon atom already. And all carbon-carbon bonds, they are single bonds. You can think of the fatty acid as being saturated with hydrogen atoms. In contrast, the fatty acids in oils, they have fewer hydrogen atoms because there is at least one double bond between carbon atoms. These lipids are called unsaturated fats because the fatty acids are not fully saturated with hydrogen atoms. Actually, fats and oils, they are similar to each other. But why are animal fats solid while plant oils, they are liquid? You might have thought about this. Actually, the answer is this is due to the double bonds in unsaturated fats. It makes links in the fatty acids. These links, as a result of these links, the molecules cannot pack together tightly enough to form a solid. Then all cell membranes, they are made mostly of another type of lipid, which is called phospholipid. This is the cell structure where lipids are involved. What is a phospholipid? Actually, a phospholipid, it contains a glycerol, then two fatty acids, which are called the tail, and a phosphate group, PO4 minus 1, that is part of the polar head of a molecule. Actually, the molecule consists of a head and a tail. So the head is the glycerol and the polar phosphate group. This is the polar head that bears a charge. But the fatty acids, they are non-polar tails of the phospholipid. This is the tail of the phospholipid. This is a comparison between the phospholipids and the normal triglycerides. These are three fatty acids bonded to glycerol. This is why it's called the triglycerides. It has three fatty acids and a molecule of glycerol, no phosphate group. This is the phospholipid that makes up the cell membrane. This is a phospholipid. This is the head that contains the PO4 minus 1, the phosphate group, and the glycerol, and the two fatty acid chains. A phospholipid has non-polar fatty acid tails and a polar head that contains a phosphate group. Cholesterol, this is the third type of lipids. We said fats and oils and cholesterol. Cholesterol is a lipid that has a ring structure. Here we come back to the ring structure of the carbon-based molecules. You may hear about the dangers of eating foods that contain a lot of cholesterol, such as eggs. But actually, your body needs a certain amount of cholesterol to function. Like what? Cholesterol is a part of the cell membrane, and your body uses it to make chemicals called steroid hormones. Cholesterol-based steroids, they have many functions. Some cholesterol-based steroids, they regulate your body's response to stress. This is very important. Other cholesterol-based steroids, such as testosterone and estrogen, they control the sexual development and the reproductive system. So cholesterol is very important to your body. Then we move to the third type of carbon-based molecules, which are proteins. Proteins, they are the most varied of the carbon-based molecules in organisms. Actually, in movement, eyesight, or digestion, proteins are at work. This is very important. So what is a protein? It's a polymer. So any polymer is made of monomers. They are called amino acids. This is very important. A protein is a polymer made of monomers called amino acids. These amino acids are molecules that contain carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, and sometimes sulfur. Amino acids are molecules that contain carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, and sometimes sulfur. Okay. Organisms use about 20 different amino acids to build proteins. These are the monomers. This is the polymer. Your body can make 12 of these amino acids. So where it will get the rest from the foods you eat, such as the meat, beans, and nuts. This is where we get the rest 8 amino acids. Okay, this is an example of amino acid called serine. Serine is one of the 20 amino acids that make up proteins in organisms. Actually, all amino acids have similar structure. They are all made of, they are carbon-based molecules, which depend on a carbon atom that is bonded to 4 other parts. Each amino acid monomer has a carbon atom that is bonded to 4 other parts, and as we saw from the previous slide. This is the carbon atom bonded to 4 different parts. 3 of these parts, they are similar in every amino acid: a hydrogen atom, an amino group NH2, and a carboxyl group COOH. The amino acids differ only in the side group or the R group. Look here, this is a carbon atom bonded to 4 different groups. Hydrogen atom, this is carboxyl group COOH, and this is NH2, which is amino group, and this is the group that differs between all the amino acids. Okay, look here, the amino acids have a carbon atom. This is again bonded to a hydrogen atom, an amino group, carboxyl group, different in the group R. Then this is the monomer, which is amino acid that make a polymer, which is the protein. So how these monomers bonded together? Actually, they form peptide bonds. A peptide bonds, they form between, look, the amino acid, the amino group of one amino acid, and the carboxyl group of another amino acid. So the protein is called a polypeptide. A protein is called a polypeptide. A polypeptide is a chain of precisely ordered amino acids linked by peptide bonds that we talked about. A protein is made of one or more polypeptides. This is very important. Amino acids form covalent bonds. They are called peptide bonds with each other. The bonds form between the amino group. This is to make sure that we got the idea, the amino group of one amino acid and the carboxyl group of another amino acid. Through peptide bonds, amino acids are linked into chains called polypeptides. So what is a protein? It's one or more polypeptides. Proteins differ in the number and the order of the amino acids. The specific sequence of amino acids determines a protein's structure and function. This is very important to the living organism. There are 2 types of interactions between the side groups of some amino acids and that are especially important in protein structure. First interaction, some side groups contain sulfur atoms. So what? The sulfur atoms can form covalent bonds that force the protein to bend in a certain shape. Second, the hydrogen bonds can form between the side groups of some amino acids. Then these hydrogen bonds cause the protein to fold in a specific structure. For example, this is the figure that shows the structure of one of the 4 polypeptides that make hemoglobin. This is the protein in your blood this is in your red blood cells that transport oxygen. So this is the part of your red blood cells that enables your red blood cells to carry and transport oxygen from the lungs to the different parts and tissues of your body. So what happens here? Each of the 4 polypeptides contains an iron atom that bonds to an oxygen molecules. So these 4 polypeptides, they are folded in a way that puts the 4 oxygen carrying sites together in a pocket-like structure inside the molecule. The 4 polypeptides, they are folded in a way that puts the 4 oxygen carrying sites, the iron atoms in the molecule of hemoglobin. They put them in a pocket-like structure inside the molecule. If a protein has incorrect amino acids, the structure may change, and this would be a disaster in a way that prevents the protein from working properly. So in case of hemoglobin, no oxygen is carried properly to the cells. So what? Just one wrong amino acid of the 574 amino acids in hemoglobin, it causes the disorder that is called the sickle cell anemia. This is a sickle cell. It looks like a crescent or a sickle. This is the shape of the cells if there is one amino acid wrong in the hemoglobin. So in this case, this is the normal red blood cell. in this case of the sickle cell anemia, the red blood cell transform from the disc-shaped to the sickle-shaped, and in this case, it cannot function properly or carry oxygen properly. And this is a huge problem for the living organism or for humans. Then we move to the nucleic acids. This is the last carbon-based molecules. Detail the instructions to build proteins. They are stored in extremely long carbon-based molecules called nucleic acids. Nucleic acids, they are polymers, so they are made of monomers that are called nucleotides. So what are nucleotides? A nucleotide, it's composed of a sugar, a phosphate group, and a nitrogen containing a molecule called a base. So in a nucleotide, the nucleic acids, they are made of monomers called nucleotides. A nucleotide, it's a phosphate group, a sugar, and a nitrogen containing a molecule called a base. There are two general types of nucleic acids, DNA and RNA. Nucleic acids, they work together. This is very important to make proteins. The DNA stores the information for putting amino acids together to make proteins. What about RNA? RNA, it helps to build the proteins. So the instructions are stored in the DNA. RNA helps in making proteins. The DNA is the basis of genes and heredity, but cannot do anything by itself. Then what? It have the structure of the DNA is the order of the nucleotides. It provides the code for the proper assembly of proteins. So it got the instructions for how to build the proteins. Then many different kinds of RNA like mRNA, tRNA, and rRNA, that molecules that assist in assembling proteins based on the DNA code. And actually the RNA might even catalyze the reaction. I hope you understood this episode of biology. See you in the next one. Thank you guys and goodbye.